You've probably heard the phrase before, not a culture fit. It's one of those smooth, sterile, corporate phrases that means everything and nothing all at once. It's a human resources eject button, a way to erase a person without leaving a messy trail of accountability. For me, my name is Laura. It was the bullet point that ended 2 years of my life. 2 years of nights and weekends I'd never get back, poured into a company that saw me as a line item on a spreadsheet until the day they decided to delete the row. If you've ever poured your soul into something only to be told you don't belong, hit that like button and let me know I'm not just screaming into the void here. It helps to know I'm not alone in this. The story of how they tried to erase me and how I used their own tools to write them a bill for millions in stolen time isn't just about revenge. It's about the quiet, irrefutable power of data and the simple, brutal truth that numbers don't lie even when people do. The meeting was in a conference room they called the Summit. It was a glass box in the middle of the open plan office, a fishbowl designed for transparency that was mostly used for executions. On one side of the table sat Julian, our CEO. He had that particular brand of tech bro charisma, a practiced smile, expensive sneakers paired with a company hoodie, and an aura of someone who had read a book about leadership and mistaken it for an experience. Next to him was Brenda from HR. She was new, barely 6 months in, and had the nervous energy of someone who knew she was a prop in a play she hadn't rehearsed. I sat opposite them, my back to the entire engineering department. I could feel their eyes on the back of my head. I could hear the ghost of 100 conversations, the soft click-clack of keyboards that powered this whole operation. My keyboard. Julian started with the usual fluff. He talked about the incredible journey we'd been on, the milestones we'd hit. He even mentioned Project Nightingale, the massive platform overhaul I had personally architected and led, the one that had just secured our next round of funding. He spoke about it as if it were a fond, shared memory, like a family vacation. My knuckles were white, where I gripped the edge of my chair. I had billed 70, 80, sometimes 90 hours a week for 6 straight months on Nightingale. I had lived on stale pizza and the hum of the servers. He had sent emails with encouraging gifts. Then came the pivot, that smooth, practiced turn from praise to dismissal. He said the company was moving in a new strategic direction. He said they needed a different kind of energy for the next phase of growth. Brenda slid a thin folder across the polished table. It stopped just short of my hands. My name was on the tab, typed neatly, Laura. He didn't look at me when he said it. His eyes were fixed on some point just over my shoulder, as if addressing the future he was so excited about, a future that I was suddenly not a part of. He said with a tone of profound, rehearsed regret that my role was being eliminated, and then he dropped the line. As part of this transition, he said we have to part ways with those who are not a strong culture fit for where we're heading, not a culture fit. The words hung in the air-conditioned quiet of the room. Culture fit. I was the one who wrote the onboarding documentation for new engineers. I was the one who mentored the junior developers, the one who stayed late to help them debug their code, the one who fought for them to get a better coffee machine, because the cheap sludge we had was symbolic of how little the company cared about the fuel it ran on. I had built a culture of collaboration and resilience in my corner of the department, a culture of actually getting things done, while he preached a culture of hustles from his ergonomic throne. Brenda cleared her throat and started reading from a script inside the folder. Standard termination procedure, final paycheck, Cobra information, return of company property. My access to all systems, she said, would be revoked in 60 minutes, 1 hour. That was the timeline for the erasure of my professional life. 60 minutes to become a ghost in the machine I had helped build. I didn't say anything. I didn't argue or plead or demand a better reason. A quiet heat flushed up my neck, but my face remained a mask of professional calm. I've found that in moments of extreme corporate cruelty, the most unnerving thing you can do is refuse to give them the emotional reaction they expect. They wanted tears or anger. They wanted a scene that would justify their decision, that would allow them to walk away feeling like they'd handled a difficult employee. I gave them nothing. I just nodded. I understand, I said. The words tasted like ash. Julian visibly relaxed. The hard part was over for him. He stood up, extending a hand. Thank you for everything, Laura. We wish you the best. I looked at his hand, then back at his face. I didn't take it. I just stood up, picked up the thin folder, and walked out of the summit. The walk back to my desk felt 1,000 miles long. The clicking of keyboards didn't stop, but the rhythm changed. It was slower, more deliberate. I was a wounded animal, and the herd was watching, pretending not to see. I packed my box, a coffee mug my sister gave me, a framed photo of my dog, a worn-out copy of a book on software architecture. I unplugged my mechanical keyboard, the one with the satisfyingly loud clack that Julian had complained about, and placed it gently in the box. It was over. But as I sat down in my chair one last time, looking at the screen, where I still had 57 minutes of access, a different thought began to form. A cold, clear, and perfectly logical thought. It wasn't about revenge. It was about accounting. They wanted to talk about value. Fine, let's calculate my value. Let's calculate everyone's value, down to the minute. The drive home was a blur. I remember the weight of the cardboard box on the passenger seat, a pathetic little collection of the artifacts of my life for the past 2 years. I remember the traffic lights changing, red to green to red, but my foot on the accelerator felt disconnected from my brain. My apartment was dark and quiet. When I walked in, I dropped my keys on the small entryway table, slid the box onto the floor, and leaned back against the closed door, letting the silence of the room swallow the noise in my head. And that's when the dam broke. It wasn't a loud, screaming breakdown. It was a quiet, gut-wrenching implosion. The professional mask I had worn out of the building cracked and fell away, and I was left with the raw, stinging humiliation of it all. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, my head in my hands. The phrase "not a culture fit" echoed in the emptiness. It was such an insidious, perfect weapon. It wasn't a critique of my work. My work was unimpeachable, and they knew it. Project Nightingale was proof of that. It was a critique of my being. It implied I was the problem, not the 80-hour work weeks, not the non-existent overtime pay, not the pizza parties in lieu of a bonus. Me. I was the gear that didn't grind smoothly enough in their great hustle machine. The memories started to flood in, unbidden. It's funny how your mind protects you. In the day-to-day, you compartmentalize. You push down the little slights, the broken promises, the mounting pile of evidence that you are being exploited. You have to just to get up in the morning and go back. But now, with the external pressure gone, the walls of those compartments dissolved. I remembered my first interview with Julian. The company was just 10 people then, working out of a cramped co-working space that smelled of stale coffee and ambition. He was magnetic. He didn't talk about a job. He talked about a mission. We're not just building a product, he'd said. We're building a family. We're going to change the industry, and we're all going to win together. He'd painted a picture of equity, of shared ownership, of a future where our sweat would translate directly into wealth. I bought into it. I was younger then, more willing to trade my time for a dream. The equity, of course, turned out to be a pittance of stock options, with a predatory vesting schedule and a strike price that seemed to climb every time we got a new round of funding. We were winning, but only he was cashing the checks. Then came the tool, Chronologue. It was introduced about a year into my tenure. Julian announced it at an all-hands meeting with a bright, cheerful slide deck. He called it a revolutionary project management and productivity tool. It was designed to help us visualize our workflow, identify bottlenecks, and ensure our client billing is pixel perfect. We all knew what it was. It was a digital leash. Chronologue was a desktop application that integrated with our coding environment, our calendars, and our communication tools. It tracked everything, every line of code committed, every minute spent in a meeting, every moment your keyboard was active. Your status was displayed for all to see, a green dot for active, a yellow dot for idle, a red dot for offline. It gamified productivity, turning our work into a constant public performance. Your weekly activity score was visible on a departmental dashboard. The unspoken rule was that you needed to be green, always green. Green when you ate lunch at your desk, green late into the evening, green on Saturday afternoons when you were just catching up on a few things. It was the technological enforcement of hustle culture. It wasn't about billing clients. It was about ensuring that every possible moment of our lives was available to be billed. And that led to the crunch. Project Nightingale. It was our white whale, a complete rewrite of our legacy platform. It was a monster of a project, and the deadline was insane, tied to a funding round we desperately needed. For 6 months, the engineering department became a ghost ship, crewed by pale, exhausted developers. We lived in that office. I remember looking up from my screen at 2 a.m., the only light coming from dozens of monitors, the only sound the hum of the air conditioning and the frantic tapping of keys. Julian would walk through around 7 p.m., a king surveying his lands, clapping people on the back and saying things like, "I love the energy in here, team, keep crushing it." Then he would go home to his family, while we, his other family, stayed and crushed ourselves into dust. There was a moment during Nightingale that should have been my breaking point. I had designed a novel caching system, a piece of architecture that was elegant, efficient, and solved a massive performance problem that had been plaguing us for years. It was the key that unlocked the whole project. I spent 3 straight weeks on it, sleeping in 4-hour shifts, my brain completely immersed in the problem. When it was done, when it worked, the relief was immense. 2 days later, Julian was presenting our progress to the board of directors. I was in the room, at the back, supposedly as the technical expert in case there were questions. He put up a slide with a simplified diagram of my caching system, and he presented it as his idea. "I had a breakthrough last week," he said, beaming. "I was thinking about the problem from a different angle, and I realized we could." He walked them through my logic, my design, using the words I had used when I explained it to him. He didn't even glance in my direction. I just sat there, my stomach a cold, hard knot, and I smiled. Because that's what you did. You smiled. You clapped. You supported the team. You didn't make waves. You weren't a culture problem. This is where my mind drifts to Amir. He was a junior developer we hired about a year ago. He was brilliant, a genuinely gifted coder, but he was young and still had that wide-eyed belief in the mission. He hadn't been ground down by the cynicism yet. I took him under my wing, not just because it was part of my job, but because I saw myself in him, the version of me that had walked in on day one. I tried to shield him. I saw him online at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I would message him directly, "Go home, Amir. That can wait until tomorrow." He would always protest, saying he just wanted to finish one more thing. I would be firm. It's a marathon, not a sprint, I'd tell him. Burnout is real. Log off. I would then spend the next hour finishing my own work and quietly fixing the bug he'd been stuck on, leaving a comment in the code so he'd find it in the morning. I was trying to preserve his enthusiasm, to keep the machine from breaking him the way it was breaking everyone else. Amir's situation was more precarious than most. He never talked about it openly, but I knew his mother was sick. He was helping to support his family, and the job, for all its toxicity, was a financial lifeline. The hustle wasn't a choice for him. It felt like a requirement for survival. The thought of him, working all those unpaid hours, while Julian was probably deciding which color of Porsche to buy next, made my blood boil. It was a quiet, slow-burning rage that I had been tamping down for months. Sitting on my apartment floor, the cold hardwood seeping into my bones, all these memories coalesced into a single, sharp point of clarity. My phone buzzed on the floor beside me. It was a Slack message, coming through on my personal device. I still had the app. My access hadn't been cut just yet. It was from Amir. His message read, "Laura, I just heard. They're telling everyone you quit for a better offer from a competitor. They're making it sound like you abandoned the team right after Nightingale. It's a lie. What's going on? Are you okay?" And that was it. That was the catalyst. It wasn't enough to fire me. It wasn't enough to call me a bad culture fit in private. They had to erase my contribution entirely. They had to salt the earth, turning my colleagues against my memory, painting me as a traitor. They were rewriting my story to fit their narrative of the happy, hustling family, and I was the bitter apostate who had left for more money. The grief in my chest vanished, replaced by something else, something cold and hard and clear, like a diamond. The numbness receded, the despair evaporated. In its place was resolve, a calm, calculated, and absolute certainty of what I had to do next. I stood up. I walked over to my work laptop, still open on the dining table. I looked at the clock on the screen. I had 43 minutes left. It wasn't about revenge. That's what I told myself, and in that moment, I believed it. Revenge is emotional. This was mathematical. It was about correcting the record. It was about bringing the truth into the light. And I knew exactly how to do it. And never did the tool they had used to monitor us, to control us, to squeeze every last drop of productivity out of us, was about to become my instrument of truth. Chronologue was a prison, but I was one of its architects. I still had a key. Foresight is a funny thing. People mistake it for paranoia. For years I'd been that person, the one who kept backups of backups, the one who documented everything, not just in the official company wiki, but in my own private encrypted notes. My colleagues would sometimes tease me about it. "Laura, you're preparing for an apocalypse that's never going to happen." But I wasn't preparing for an apocalypse. I was just a software architect. And a good architect always understands the system, not just for how it's supposed to work, but for all the ways it can fail, or be made to fail. Chronologue was a system I knew intimately. I had been on the integration team that first rolled it out. I had written the documentation for its API. I knew its queries, its data structures, its hidden endpoints that were reserved for administrative diagnostics. And for the past 6 months, during the long, soul-crushing nights of Project Nightingale, I had been working on a little side project, a personal script. It wasn't born of malice. It was born of professional curiosity, a programmer's itch. The question that drove me was simple: could I quantify the human cost of our hustle culture? We talked endlessly about technical debt, the implied cost of rework caused by choosing an easy solution now instead of using a better approach that would take longer. I started thinking about cultural debt, the accumulated unpaid cost of burnout, exhaustion, and stolen time. My script was my attempt to measure it. I wrote it in Python, a quiet little tool that I kept in a private repository far away from the company's prying eyes. It was designed to do one thing: talk to the Chronolog API, pull the raw activity logs for every engineer in the department, and process them. It would cross-reference the timestamps with our official 9 to 5, Monday to Friday work schedule. Anything outside of that, anything logged after 6 p.m. on a weekday, anything logged on a Saturday or Sunday, was flagged. It wasn't a complex idea, but the execution had to be perfect. It had to be silent. It had to look like a series of normal, routine diagnostic queries, the kind a senior developer might run to debug a performance issue. I designed it to be a ghost, a whisper in the machine. Now sitting at my dining table, with the clock ticking down, my little academic exercise was about to become a weapon. 41 minutes left. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of my apartment. My hands, usually so steady on the keyboard, trembled slightly as I pulled up the terminal window. The black screen, with its stark white cursor, was a familiar comfort. This was my world. I navigated to the directory where I kept the script. The file was named audit_log_analyzer.p. Such a boring technical name for what it was about to do. I had to configure it first. I needed to set the date range, the last 2 full years. I needed to input the list of employee IDs for the entire engineering department, past and present. I had that list memorized. I typed them in, my fingers flying across the keys. Amir's ID, Maria's, the other senior architect, the junior dev who had quit 3 months ago after a panic attack. My own. Each ID was a person, a life, a story of stolen hours. Then I needed to add the salary data. This was the most damning piece of the puzzle. Our company, in a misguided attempt at transparency, had published salary bands for every level: junior developer, developer, senior developer, architect. They thought it made them look progressive. What it really did was give me the exact numbers I needed to turn log time into stolen wages. I hard-coded the average salary for each band into the script. It would use this to calculate the hourly rate, and then the unpaid overtime. I even factored in the legal requirement for time and a half for hourly employees, which under state law, many of us arguably were, given the level of control the company exerted over our work. This was a debatable point, a plausible inaccuracy that would make any lawyer's eyes light up. 35 minutes left. I took a deep breath. It was time. I typed Python audit_log_analyzer.p into the command line and hit enter. And then nothing. For a second my heart stopped. Did they cut my access early? Did I make a mistake in the code? Then the first line of output appeared on the screen. Info authenticating with Chronolog API. Success. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I was in. The script began its work. It was a beautiful, terrifying thing to watch. Lines of text scrolled up my screen. A waterfall of data being pulled from the cloud. Info fetching logs for employee ID 7. 10%, 25%, 50%, 100%, done. Info processing 24 months of data for employee ID 7. Info fetching logs for employee ID 12. 10%, 25%, 50%, 100%, done. Info processing 24 months of data for employee ID 12. It was working its way through the entire department. Each name was a new wave of anger and validation. I saw the progress bars fill up. One by one, a silent testament to 2 years of relentless pressure. The process was slow, deliberately slow. I had built in delays, to avoid tripping any automated security flags that might be watching for unusually high query volumes. It was agonizing. The clock on my laptop was a tyrant. 30 minutes, 25. While the script ran, I opened a browser. I used a privacy-focused browser, routed through a VPN, a habit I'd developed long ago. I navigated to the website of a law firm I knew by reputation, Stern and Cohen. A friend of mine, a developer from another startup that had imploded in a similar fashion, had mentioned them. She called them absolute sharks, the kind you want on your side. Their website was all business. No smiling stock photos, just stark text listing their specialties: class action lawsuits, wage and hour disputes, employee rights. Perfect. I found their general contact form. The script was still running. 20 minutes left. My gaze flicked between the terminal window and the clock. Come on, come on. Info fetching logs for employee ID 42. That was me. 10%. 25%. It felt like watching my own life being played back in slow motion, one stolen weekend at a time. 50%, 100%, done. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last employee ID was processed. The script moved to the final phase. Info aggregating all data, Info calculating departmental totals, Info generating final report. A new file appeared in the directory. Overtime _ analysis _ final.csv. My hands were slick with sweat as I double-clicked it. It opened in a spreadsheet program. The raw data was overwhelming. Thousands upon thousands of rows. Each row was a single day for a single employee. Employee ID, date, time in, time out, billable hours as logged, total hours as calculated by the script, overtime hours, and the final brutal column, unpaid wages. I scrolled down. I saw Amir's rows, so much red, hundreds of hours of overtime a year. I saw Maria's. I saw my own. My own number was staggering, well into the six figures over 2 years. I scrolled all the way to the bottom, to the grand total. The script had summed it all up. My breath caught in my throat. The number was larger than I had even imagined. It was millions, a 7-figure number representing the collective cultural debt of our hustle hard and win together family. 10 minutes left. I had the evidence. But was it perfect? I needed to be sure. My own access could be a point of contention. They could claim I manipulated the data. I needed a sliver of validation from inside, from someone whose access was still clean. I needed Amir. I switched to a secure messaging app on my personal phone, one we occasionally used for non-work chatter. I sent him a message. Hey, weird question. Can you do me a favor? I'm working on a personal project, analyzing productivity data. Can you run a quick query on Chronolog for me? Just need you to pull your own total logged hours for the month of March. Just the raw number from the dashboard. It was a simple request. It wouldn't look suspicious. It was the kind of data nerd thing I would ask. He replied almost instantly. Sure, Laura, that's random. Is this for that analysis tool you were tinkering with? One sec. A minute later, a number came back. It matched the raw data in my spreadsheet for him. For that month exactly. My calculations were built on a foundation of truth. My heart swelled with a fierce, protective feeling. This wasn't just for me. It was for him. It was for the single mom on the QA team, who worked late every night. It was for everyone. 5 minutes left. I went back to the law firm's contact form. I didn't fill in my name or number. I uploaded the single CSV file. In the message box, I typed a few simple anonymous sentences. Attached, you will find a full data export of the last 2 years of employee activity logs from the tech startup company name. The data sourced directly from their own internal monitoring software. Chronolog is self-evident. It documents systemic, widespread wage theft amounting to millions of dollars. Consider this an anonymous tip from a former employee. Do with it what you will. I clicked submit. A small spinning wheel appeared, then a confirmation message. Thank you for your submission. I closed the browser, cleared my cache, and deleted my history. I dragged my entire script folder to the trash bin and securely emptied it. I looked at the clock. 2 minutes left. I stood up, went to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water, my hand perfectly steady now. I took a long, slow sip, and then, as I watched the second hand on the microwave clock tick past the hour, my work laptop screen went black. A moment later, it flickered to a generic login screen. My access was gone. I was officially a ghost, but I had a feeling the haunting was just about to begin. The first week was the worst. It was a week of suffocating silence, not just from the company, but from the world. I existed in a strange limbo, cut off from the professional identity that had consumed my life for 2 years. Every morning I'd wake up with a jolt of adrenaline, thinking I was late for the daily stand-up meeting, only to remember there was nowhere to go. The silence from the law firm was the most unnerving. I had launched a digital missile, and I had no idea if it had hit its target or simply fizzled out in the vast, empty space of the internet. Doubt began to creep in. Had I been too dramatic? Had I misread the situation? Maybe they had a legal loophole I didn't know about. Maybe the anonymous tip was dismissed as the work of a disgruntled employee. The confident, calculating architect who had executed her plan with perfect precision was replaced by Laura, the unemployed woman eating cereal for dinner and refreshing her personal email for the 10th time in an hour. The debatable character logic of my own mind was on full display. I had taken a massive risk, and now I was second-guessing every part of it, my emotional state swinging between righteous fury and paralyzing anxiety. I started applying for jobs, going through the motions of updating my resume and writing cover letters. It felt hollow. How could I describe my biggest achievement, Project Nightingale, without mentioning the company I now considered my sworn enemy? How could I explain the gap that had just appeared in my employment history? Fired for not being a culture fit. You can't exactly put that on LinkedIn. It was on the 8th day that my phone buzzed with a message from Amir. It wasn't on the secure app. It was a standard text message, which was unusual. All it said was, "Call me, private number." Now a knot of dread and excitement tightened in my stomach. I used a calling app to dial his number, my heart pounding a familiar, frantic rhythm. He picked up on the first ring. His voice was a hushed, urgent whisper. "Laura, can you talk?" "Yes, Amir." "What's wrong? You sound—" "It happened," he breathed, and I could hear the shock and awe in his voice. "It actually happened." "What happened? Tell me." "A letter," he said. "A man in a suit, a courier, hand-delivered it to Julian this morning, right in the middle of the office. Julian took it into his glass-walled office, and we all pretended not to watch him open it. His face, Laura, I've never seen him look like that." He went pale, like sheet white. My own hand went to my mouth. "A letter from who?" "Stern and Cohen." He whispered the name like a curse. "And that's not all. He wasn't the only one. They're arriving for everyone, one by one. Every single engineer who has worked here in the last 2 years, current and former, is getting a certified letter from them. Maria called me. She got one at her new job. Kevin, who moved to Oregon, he got one too. I got mine an hour ago." I sank onto my sofa, the phone pressed hard against my ear. It was real. It was working. The missile had hit. "What does it say, Amir?" "It's a notification," he said, and I could hear the rustle of paper as he presumably read from it. "It's a notice of intent to file a class action lawsuit, for it lists the specific labor codes for systemic wage theft and failure to pay overtime. It says they have obtained detailed and comprehensive evidence from the company's own internal records provided by an anonymous source that documents the claims." An anonymous source. I closed my eyes, a wave of profound, vindicated relief washing over me. I had remained a ghost. "What's it like there?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It's a morgue," he said, his voice dropping even lower. "No one is talking. The dashboard with the chronologue activity scores has been taken offline. All the managers are in a closed-door meeting with Julian and Brenda from HR. You can hear him shouting through the walls. Brenda came out once to get water, and she looked like she'd been crying. All work has stopped. Everyone is just sitting at their desks, looking at their letters, then looking at each other. The family is officially dead, Laura. It feels like the day after a nuclear bomb went off. The irony was so thick, I could taste it. The tool of their oppression, the ever-watchful eye of chronologue, had become the all-seeing eye of justice. Julian's obsession with data, with quantifying every second of our lives for his own profit, had created a perfect, irrefutable log of his own crimes. He had built the gallows, and I had just kicked the stool out from under him. Over the next few days, Amir became my war correspondent, my insider on the front lines of the company's silent collapse. He'd send me updates from the bathroom or on his lunch break, painting a vivid picture of the escalating panic. The initial shock had curdled into a thick, pervasive atmosphere of distrust. The engineers, who had once competed for the highest activity score on chronologue, were now a unified front. They had a common enemy, and for the first time, it wasn't a deadline or a software bug. It was management. Julian tried to regain control. He emerged from his marathon legal meetings with a new strategy, charm, and deflection. He started walking the floor again, trying to engage people in casual conversation, but his charisma was gone, replaced by a desperate, sweaty sheen. No one would meet his eye. He'd ask an engineer how their weekend was, and they'd give a one-word answer before putting their headphones back on. The open plan office, once a symbol of collaborative energy, now felt like a high-security prison during a silent protest. Brenda, the HR prop, was tasked with the impossible. She started calling engineers into one-on-one meetings. Amir was one of the first. He told me she tried to downplay the letter, calling it an aggressive tactic from a predatory law firm. She claimed it was all a big misunderstanding based on misinterpreted data. She actually tried to tell me that my logged hours on chronologue didn't represent actual work time. Amir recounted, his voice laced with disbelief. She said, "Sometimes developers leave their computers on while they think or take breaks, and the system can't distinguish that." I just stared at her. I asked her, "Brenda, are you suggesting that the productivity tool you use to evaluate our performance is inaccurate?" She didn't have an answer. She just stammered and moved on. This was a classic HR move, an attempt to introduce plausible deniability, but it was too late. For 2 years, they had held up chronologue as the ultimate source of truth. Our activity scores were discussed in performance reviews. People were praised for high scores and questioned about low ones. They couldn't now claim the data was meaningless without exposing their own hypocrisy. I asked Amir why he was staying. With his talent, he could have found another job in a week. This was where the debatable character logic of his situation became so crucial. "I thought about leaving," he admitted. "The second I got that letter, my first instinct was to just run. But then I looked around. I saw Maria, who has 2 kids and a mortgage. I saw the interns who were probably too scared to even open their letters. And I thought about my mom. The money they owe me. It's not just a number, Laura. It would make a real difference for her treatment. And besides," he paused, and I could hear the steel in his voice, "I want to see this. I want to watch them answer for what they did. Staying here, it doesn't feel like I'm working for them anymore. It feels like I'm a witness for us." He was no longer the naive junior developer, The crisis had forged him into something stronger. He wasn't just my ally, he was a key player in his own right, the voice of the collective. He was the one who forwarded me the internal memo Julian sent out a few days later. It was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak, filled with phrases like navigating a complex legal matter and committed to our team. It urged employees not to speak with external parties and to direct all questions to Brenda, who by this point was probably hiding under her desk. The public reveal hadn't happened yet. To the outside world, to our clients and competitors, everything was normal. The company's website still touted its vibrant culture. Julian's blog still featured posts about the future of work. The panic was contained, a silent, high-pressure system building within the glass walls of the office. But a system under that much pressure can't hold forever. Something was about to give. The silent takeover was nearly complete. All that was left was for the walls to come tumbling down. The breaking point came a week later. Julian backed into a corner and, likely acting on the desperate advice of his own lawyers, decided to make a move. He called a mandatory, in-person all-hands meeting for the entire engineering department. No video conferencing allowed. He wanted them in a room. He wanted to look them in the eye and deploy the last weapon in his arsenal, a direct personal appeal mixed with a blatant bribe. Amir, my faithful correspondent, gave me the play-by-play via text from the back of the conference room. My phone vibrated with his updates, and reading them felt like watching a slow-motion car crash. Amir, we're all here. The mood is tense. Julian is at the front. He's trying to smile, but he just looks sick. Amir, he's starting with an apology. I know the last week has been confusing. He's talking about growing pains. He's calling the lawsuit a distraction from our mission. I could picture it perfectly. Julian in his expensive hoodie, pacing in front of a projection screen, trying to recapture the old magic, but the spell was broken. The congregation no longer believed. Amir. Oh, you are not going to believe this. He's admitting there were inconsistencies in how overtime was tracked, calling it a systems error. A systems error that went on for 2 years and only ever benefited the company. Amir, here it comes. The offer. He's announcing a one-time discretionary bonus for all engineers as a sign of good faith. A discretionary bonus, not back pay, not an admission of liability. A gift, a pathetic attempt to reframe theft as generosity. It was a weak, transparent ploy. But then came the hook. Amir, it's worse. He's saying anyone who signs a new employment agreement with an updated NDA and arbitration clause will get a significantly enhanced bonus. He's literally trying to buy our silence and our legal rights in public. I felt a surge of cold fury. He was trying to pit them against each other. The ones who desperately needed the money versus the ones who could afford to hold out. It was a vile tactic, but one I had anticipated. It was the move of a man with no cards left to play. And then the power shifted. It didn't shift because of something I did. It shifted because of the culture of competence and mutual respect I had fostered, the very thing they had fired me for. It shifted because of Maria. Maria was one of the best architects at the company, second only to me. She was sharp, respected, and had zero tolerance for nonsense. She had been a quiet pillar of the department for years. Amir. Oli. Maria just stood up. My thumb hovered over the screen. My breath held. Amir. She has the letter in her hand. She's not shouting. Her voice is calm, so calm it's scary. Amir. She just asked him a question. Julian, thank you for this offer. I just have a clarifying question. According to my calculations, based on the numbers this law firm has provided, the enhanced bonus you're offering is still less than half of the unpaid wages you owe me, not including penalties and interest required by state law. So, my question is this a down payment? The entire room went silent. Amir's text was followed by another. A single word, Amir. Wrecked. He told me later that Julian just stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He had no answer. Her question had cut through all the corporate jargon and exposed the offer for what it was, an insult, a lowball settlement attempt disguised as a bonus. The plausible inaccuracy of their offer, legally and morally, was laid bare for everyone to see. Maria didn't wait for a response. She just said, "Thank you, that's all I needed to know," and she sat down. The spell wasn't just broken, it had been shattered into a million pieces. The meeting fell apart. People started talking amongst themselves, ignoring Julian completely. He tried to regain control, but it was useless. He had lost the room. He had lost the company. The exodus began the next morning. Maria's resignation was the first email to land. It was short, professional, and CC'd to the entire department. By noon, two other senior engineers, both critical to the current product pipeline, had followed her lead. They weren't just quitting, they were making a statement. The talent, the actual value of the company, was walking out the door. The client exodus I had envisioned was never about clients calling to cancel contracts. It was about this. It was about the company's inability to serve its clients, because the people who held all the knowledge were gone. The foundation was crumbling. Julian could have all the client contracts in the world, but he had no one left who could actually do the work. The company had become a hollow shell, a brand name with a failing engine. This triggered the next phase of Julian's panic. The desperate counter. 2 days after she quit, Maria told me Julian had called her personally. He offered her my old job, director of engineering. He offered her a massive raise and a piece of equity that would have been life-changing. He was offering her everything they had denied me, everything they should have given her years ago. She told him no. She said, "Julian, you don't get it. This was never about the money or the title. It was about respect. And you've proven you have none." The power had truly shifted. The leverage was no longer his. It belonged to the people he had exploited. He had believed the company's power was in its brand, its funding, its charismatic CEO. He was wrong. The power was, and always had been, in the quiet competence of the people who built the product. And they were now taking their power back, one resignation at a time. The house of cards was collapsing, and all I had done was pull out a single critical card at the bottom. The rest was just gravity. The final act didn't play out in a dramatic boardroom confrontation. It played out over the phone, a week after the disastrous all-hands meeting, with his company hemorrhaging talent and his legal troubles mounting. Julian called me. My phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize, but I had a feeling I knew who it was. I let it ring 3 times, then answered, my voice deliberately calm and neutral. "Hello?" There was a pause on the other end, then his voice, strained and stripped of all its usual confidence. "Laura, it's Julian." I said nothing. I just waited. The silence stretched, and I could hear his breathing, ragged and uneven. He was used to being in control, to leading the conversation. My silence was a vacuum, and it forced him to speak. I know we ended things on a bad note," he started, his voice a pathetic attempt at conciliation. "But this is insane. You're destroying the company, everything we built. Everything you built." It was a classic manipulator's tactic, trying to make me feel guilty for the consequences of his own actions. The old me, the loyal, conflict-averse Laura, might have felt a pang of that guilt, but the old me was gone. The company seems to be destroying itself. "Julian," I said, my tone as flat as a dial tone. "I'm just an observer." "An observer?" He spat, the anger finally breaking through the facade. "Don't play dumb with me, Laura. Stern and Cohen, the anonymous source. It has your fingerprints all over it. The timing, The data, only you could have done this. Why? After everything I did for you, everything he did for me, the sheer, unadulterated arrogance of that statement was breathtaking. The unpaid overtime, the stolen weekends, the public credit stealing, in his mind, that was him doing something for me. This was the moment for the line I had been rehearsing in my head. I leaned into the phone, my voice dropping to a quiet, lethal register. "You're right about one thing, Julian," I said. "You taught me a valuable lesson. You taught me the critical importance of meticulous, accurate record keeping. You built a system to track every minute of our value. I just ran the report." He was silent. I had taken his own obsession, his own weapon of control, and turned it back on him. I had used his own language, the sterile terminology of data and reporting, to describe his downfall, and then I deployed the thematic trigger, the phrase that had become my mantra through this whole ordeal, the one that was both perfectly true and deliciously debatable. "It wasn't about revenge, Julian," I said, and the words felt like ice. "It was about balancing the ledger. The numbers were off. I just corrected them." He started to sputter, to threaten lawsuits, to talk about non-disclosure agreements and intellectual property theft. It was all noise, the flailing of a man who had already lost. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to shout. The work was already done. "I have to go, Julian," I said, as if I were ending a call with a telemarketer. "Good luck with your audit," and I hung up. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, quiet sense of completion. The final line of code had been executed. The program was finished. The rest of the story came to me in pieces, from news alerts and texts from Amir. The law firm, armed with irrefutable data, and the collective testimony of nearly the entire engineering department, had Julian dead to rights. The company, facing a catastrophic and unwinnable public court battle, settled. The number was never made public, but from what Amir could piece together, it was massive. It covered all the back wages, significant penalties, and the firm's legal fees. The settlement triggered the final phase of the collapse. The company's board of directors, who cared far more about the bottom line and public perception than they ever did about hustle culture, acted swiftly. A terse press release appeared on a tech newswire a week later. Company name announces leadership transition. CEO Julian Vance to step down. He wasn't just stepping down. He was pushed out, his golden parachute likely shredded by a morals clause in his contract. Brenda, the HR accomplice, was quietly let go a few days later, a minor casualty in the war she had helped enable. The system, faced with undeniable failure, had purged the virus. It wasn't my direct doing. It was a consequence. My action created a condition, and the system corrected itself. My vindication wasn't a throne. I didn't start a rival company and poach all of Julian's clients. That would have been his move, his definition of winning. My victory was something else entirely. It was quieter, more personal, and infinitely more satisfying. 6 months later, I was in a different office. The lights were bright and warm, not the harsh, industrial fluorescence of the old place. It was 4:45 p.m. on a Friday. I was at a whiteboard, sketching out a system architecture for a new project, something genuinely interesting and challenging. Standing next to me, marker in hand, was Amir. After the settlement, I had made a few calls. A contact at a stable, respectable software company I admired was hiring. I recommended Amir. They interviewed him, loved him, and hired him on the spot. A month later, when a senior architect position opened up on his team, he recommended me. He pointed to a part of my diagram. What if we introduce a message queue here? He asked. It would decouple the services and make the whole thing more resilient. It was a brilliant suggestion. I smiled. That's good, Emir. That's really good. Let's spec it out on Monday. He nodded, put the cap on his marker, and started packing his bag. Sounds good. Have a great weekend, Laura. You too, I said. At 5:01 p.m., I was the last one left in our section. I packed my own bag, turned off my monitor, and walked out the door. The sun was still up. The weekend was mine. The city was alive with the promise of 2 full days of my own time. This was my new reality. This was my throne. It wasn't a seat at the head of a table. It was freedom. It was peace. It was the quiet, undeniable luxury of a balanced ledger. In the end, it comes down to a single simple truth. Your time has a value. It's the most finite resource you have. It's the currency of your life, and you choose how to spend it. For 2 years, I led a company, and a man named Julian tell me that my time was only valuable when it was serving his ambition. The late nights, the canceled plans, the moments of life I gave away for free, they weren't seen as sacrifices. They were seen as the baseline, the expectation. The final settlement amount was more than just a number on a legal document. When I finally saw it, on a copy of the letter that an old colleague forwarded me, I didn't see dollar signs. I saw a quantification of the truth. I saw 2 years of stolen evenings. I saw hundreds of missed dinners with friends. I saw thousands of hours of life that were taken, not given. That number was a monument to their greed, and its payment was a quiet revolution for every person who had ever been told to just be a team player. The money made a real difference for a lot of people. For Amir, it meant his mother got a level of care that would have been impossible before. For Maria, it meant a down payment on a bigger house for her kids. For me, it was a safety net, a foundation of security that allowed me to choose my next step based on what I wanted, not what I needed. It was the freedom to say no, and that is a priceless form of power. They called it hustle culture. They called it being part of a family. They dressed up exploitation in the language of community and ambition. But a family doesn't systematically steal from you. Hustle isn't a substitute for respect, and a mission is not a permission slip to treat people like disposable resources. Your work has value. Your contribution is real. You are not a line item on a spreadsheet that can be deleted. I learned that the hard way. I learned that loyalty is a two-way street, and when you're the only one driving, you're not on a road, you're on a treadmill. But I also learned that the tools of our own work, the very systems designed to measure and control us, can sometimes hold the seeds of our own liberation. Data can be a weapon. Truth can be a strategy. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is not to shout, but to calculate, to present a bill for what you are owed, and to calmly, quietly, and insistently demand that it be paid in full. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or erased in your own work, please do me a favor and hit that like button. It truly helps to know that these stories matter and that we're not alone in these experiences. Leave a comment below and tell me about a time you had to fight for your own value or what culture fit really means to you. And finally, if you want to hear more stories about turning the tables and reclaiming your power, please subscribe to the channel and share this video. It helps spread the message that everyone's time is valuable and everyone deserves to be respected. Thank you for listening.